What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Gig Boss Podcast, where musicians go to learn how to navigate the new music economy. My name's Adam Meckler. I'm your host, and it's my mission to get you the tools to have a thriving career in music. I was just stirring shit up on social media, just stirring shit up. People are mad at me for saying some things about music programs. Man, I want to clarify, I love music so much. I loved majoring in music in college. I definitely wish there were things that I had been taught. I wish that people had talked about the music industry. All the things we're doing on this podcast is like, I'm filling in these holes. I'm learning from people on this podcast, things that I wish I had learned when I was being prepared to be a professional musician. You know, Steve Cole just said in the last episode, craft is key, but if you're not equally addressing the industry, then you're doing a disservice to the people who are majoring in music. And I come from a place of somebody who majors in music. I know there's people that listen to this podcast who are like songwriters, people who have day jobs. There are lots of ways to create a meaningful music career. Lots of ways. And we're going to talk about 9 of them today. I'm going to point out all these various different ways that people make meaningful careers in music. And I'm going to get up my notes here and get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Adam. I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I play trumpet primarily. People know me as a trumpet player. But I started on guitar. It was my first instrument. I started writing songs in high school. I was a lead singer in a rock band, or one of several people who sung and wrote songs for that band. I played guitar. I played flugelhorn in that band, and I sang, and I wrote a bunch of songs. And now I'm bringing that stuff back into my music. I'm combining singing and playing. I play bass. I play drums. I play piano. I compose a lot of music. I have this 18-piece big band called the Adam Meckler Orchestra, and I write all the music for it. And we've released a bunch of albums, and we've sold out theater shows, and man, this thing has been a beautiful struggle. It's been difficult. I mean, like, let's say it like it is. It's so hard to be a professional musician, and I worked my buns off my whole career. I've missed friends' weddings. I've missed parties. I've missed family events because I'm always gigging or touring. And I'm in academia now. I'm in my 4th year of being the director of jazz studies at Michigan Technological University. I love working with my students. I love being there. I do miss being in the shit, being in it. I miss that. I get to tour. I leave and I go on tours and I play with people. I'm playing with some real heavy cats this weekend. Kenny Holman and Mike Nelson, who tour with Corey Wong as the Hornheads. I played with the Hornheads for my last couple years in Minneapolis and played on a bunch of Corey Wong's albums through that. And recently-ish played on the Dave Koz Corey Wong album, The Golden Hour. So I'm in it. I'm doing it. I'm still really working hard on my own stuff. I'm releasing my own music all the time. Music just, it feels like it just endlessly flows from me. That may sound like such an asshole-ish thing to say, but I don't mean it that way. It's like, sincerely, I could be in the studio all day long, every day, and never run out of things. It's just like, it's just there. I don't know what it is. It's always been this way, I'm like tearing up a little bit talking about it. My math teacher as a kid reached out to my mom and was like, "Hey, Adam is distracting the other students." This is when I was in, I don't know, 3rd grade or something. Adam's distracting others because he hums during math tests. It's like I always when I'm parallel parking, I start singing. It's just music has been a way for me to organize my brain, the thoughts in my brain. And I've been attracted to a lot of different kinds of music. I love singer-songwriter music. I love music with lyrics, but I love weird jazz, modern jazz music, free stuff that's chaotic, symphonies. I love all that stuff. I'm talking too much about myself. I'm sorry. There are lots of models for being a modern musician. Let's get into it. The coffee shop gig. The coffee shop gig is model number 1. And I have a lot of friends that have done this where this could be any job, but coffee shops, particularly Starbucks, I think offers benefits And so these can be attractive jobs for somebody who's looking for flexibility, maybe looking to have afternoons and evenings open, because a lot of those coffee shops are open, until early afternoon and then close. This is a model where you could have your afternoons open to go to rehearsals, to play gigs, to teach private lessons, if that's something you want to do. And it's a position you could hold to have regular income while you build up other parts. And this is going to be a theme of the episode. This is a position you could hold while you build up income from other sources. And when you get income rolling in from other sources to a point that's reliable, and there's some models for treating your finances that are really helpful. Like, you could funnel everything you make from music into a music account, a business account, and you could pay yourself a salary. And if you're working a job, what you could do is you could just if you're able to pay all your bills with your job money, which is a big if, I know. But if you're able to pay all your bills with the money that you're holding from a job like a coffee shop gig, you could take all the money you're making from music, or a majority of it, and put it aside and wait for it to build up until you can reliably pay yourself a salary of a certain amount of money per month. And then the more you build up your music career, the more you build your income streams from various different things, the more you can pay yourself in a monthly salary. And then when months like December and January roll around, and if you're like a heavy gigging musician, that like gigs tend to slow down January, February. There's a whole Christmas scene of like people that just totally crushed December. That wasn't necessarily me. I played a lot of shows in December, and I did start doing some Christmas things here and there. I got called to do some kind of higher profile things, but generally December was a kind of slower month for me, and January, certainly in February. And then things would really start to pick up kind of mid-February, March, April, May. And then for me, I'd be doing all kinds of other stuff we'll talk about. But the coffee shop gig, that's model number one. Some reliable part-time job that you can get benefits from, basically. Health insurance, regular income, lots of gigging and or income from online content sources. Yeah, that's what I had on my notes. The second model number two, is the full-time day gig that is not related to music. Okay, the full-time day gig that's not related to music. I would say that more than 50% of the people that I played professionally and regularly with in Minneapolis had day jobs that were not related to music. Is that right? Could that be right? Maybe 50%. I mean, like a lot of the people that I was playing with professionally, and these are like heavy players that could really play, that were playing at a very high level, sometimes the highest level. They were working day gigs like computer science, marketing, right? I know a lot of people that majored in jazz studies and then got marketing gigs, because people at these firms are looking for creative-minded people, who's more creative than a jazz musician or a musician in general. All right, so the full-time day gig, not related to music. Real estate is another one that a lot of musician friends of mine do, and I think part of that is that there's some flexibility. And like with anything, it's like nothing is that flexible, nothing is that passive in terms of income. And real estate is something that you got to be showing boatloads of houses to a whole bunch of people that maybe aren't really even serious about. I mean, it's like in the Zillow age, people are just wanting to look at houses. So, that's going to be a lot of work, of course. But it is a little more flexible, I think, schedule-wise, and that allows you to maybe take some gigs, maybe go on short little tours that perhaps some other day gigs would not allow, okay? So that's number two. Number three is the private instructor and gigging musician. Now, this is the model that I sort of banked on early in my career. When I left college, I did not want to be a teacher. I did not want to teach at all. I just wanted to play. That's why I majored in performance. I was going to be a player. I was going to be a full-time player. I was going to be touring. And certainly I did that. But when I first got started, getting connected in the scene, getting enough gigs to pay bills, that was difficult. And it took a long time. And so I started to supplement with teaching lessons because I was playing some shows here and there. I was meeting some people. And I think I've got a personality for that, for teaching. I love people. I love being around people. I'm generally high energy. I think I'm good about communicating how I do things. And that's something that I've really worked on now as well, is being able to communicate how I do what I do musically. And if you have that skill, I mean, that's such a huge skill to be a musician who plays in a really deep and like experiences music in a really deep way, but can also talk about it specifically and maybe even create specific guidelines for how to achieve what you've achieved, or at least some steps along the way that could be taken. So I did that. I was teaching. Eventually I got up to like a lot of private students. And so every afternoon I would teach private students. And during the daytime, I would go to rehearsals with bands who were full of other people who were like pros that didn't have day jobs. So we would rehearse during the day, 10 a.m., 11 a.m. And then people would leave and play gigs. And for me, it was rehearsals during the day, writing, composing. I was composing all this big band music. And I remember my wife being like, "Are you ever going to make money with this big band music you're writing?" And now I run a jazz program at a university. So that's like right there, I guess, is where all that work went towards. I mean, also everything I've done musically, I mean, it's been really cool and I'm continuing to do it. But I was writing all that music without any really idea of like how it would make me money. It's just pure of heart. Just like, I'm just going to write and we'll see what happens. And I was doing that during the day. And then in the afternoons, I was running to teach lessons. And I eventually got to, I don't remember how many, 30 students maybe. And so every day in the afternoons during the week, I'd be teaching, a handful of lessons between 4 and 6, between 3 and 5 or 6 p.m., but between 4 and 6 students is what I meant to say. And then I would run off to a gig, and I'd play a gig, from like 7 to 10 or from 8 to 11 or 9 to midnight or 9 to 1 or 9 to 2. And that worked great. And that was a good model. I was very drained from private lesson teaching, emotionally, musically. And so that part of it was hard. But I mean, like, the private lesson thing is a great avenue. And I know a lot of professional musicians who go that route. People who have master's degrees, DMAs. Now, by the end of my time in Minneapolis, when I was really established as an artist and I was established as an educator, I was charging $75 an hour for lessons. When I first got started, I was charging a lot less and was getting a lot less. I was working through a school some of the time. I was working for myself some of the time. So it just kind of depended on the situation, like how much I was making. But towards the end, when it was like people were seeking me out because of how I played and because of how I presented my music, then it was like, okay, if you want to study with me, I want you to be a serious musician who's really serious about wanting to do it. And then it's going to cost a little more money. And I want to do hour-long lessons. So I did hour-long lessons 1 day a week near the end of my career. And this is kind of complicated, but I was at a university or college, a for-profit college called McNally Smith College of Music. That was a really cool, like modern music school. And they suddenly closed. So like I was out all this income. I was adjunct faculty, but I was there 4 days a week. So I was like, I had really grown up. I had really built up my teaching there. And when that suddenly closed, I was like, all right, I'll teach 1 night a week. And then I got the gig playing with the Hornheads, and I was like, oh, we got session work every week. I was doing, the first thing I did was for like a Michael Jackson thing for Sony. I was like, geez. And so I thought maybe I'll be all right. Maybe I'll be able to, and my wife had quit her job by that time because I was working, like my performance career was really humming, and my freelance education career was really humming. And I had the job at McNally Smith where I was kind of part-time, but it was like a nice steady chunk of income. And I was also at McPhail Center for Music doing some jazz combos and jazz related stuff that I had kind of built up over there over the course of 5 or 6 years. And that, so the model of being a private instructor and then having my afternoons, having my evenings for gigs and my daytimes for rehearsals, that worked for a short time. And it was a great stepping stone. And it was a great way to like hone my teaching because I worked with a lot of beginners, and working with beginners, particularly as a trumpet player, trumpet is just hard. It's just hard. And so I got really good at like communicating how I do what I do. And that's a skill now that I've taken and I've applied it to being an academic at the university level, but also like when I'm on stage and I'm talking about the music I'm making, especially since a lot of the music I make is creative music. Being able to talk about what you do, as I said earlier, just helps the audience come along with you. They know what to listen for. It's just better. Okay, so the private instructor / gigging musician, cool. The next one I talked about a little bit, the academic. All right, the academic is somebody who's like a university professor, and I'm going to try not to throw any shade because I was just stirring stuff up on social media, making people mad about what I was saying about music majors versus not music majors. I just think it's so interesting that there's so much involvement in the program that I have here, which is a non-major program, and that a lot of schools with majors are really struggling to fill bands and to get students in the door. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of things. This could be a whole other podcast episode. It's like we could talk about what universities could be doing, and I know a lot of them are looking that in the face, and they're taking a hard look at their numbers and enrollment, and they're working on modernizing their thing, and I think that's great. I think that's awesome. I know a lot of people are working hard on that. I don't mean to throw any shade, but the academic is a model, and a lot of musicians have referred to this model as the modern day record deal, right? So record labels aren't typically giving out major record deals for like creative artists anymore. And so if you're somebody who like plays creative music, but there are also positions for people who are producers, for people who deal with Ableton and who are film composers. There's like lots of avenues to be an academic now. And a lot of programs, as I said, are modernizing. So a lot of the stuff is now starting to be added. There's like hip hop programs. Toki Wright, who I collaborated with on my Magnificent Madness album. He's a hip hop artist who now does entrepreneurship stuff at Berklee College of Music, but he ran the first fully accredited hip hop program in the United States at McNally Smith College, where I was, which is how we knew each other. But the academic is a really good option if you're somebody who can communicate about your music, if you have a certain terminal degree. Like a lot of institutions require a terminal degree. Some don't. Depends on the institution. I have a master's degree, not a doctorate. So like my 10 years of being just like a full-time performer, player, freelance educator, that kind of counted as my DMA, which is a Doctor of Musical Arts, for those of you that don't know what DMA means. And that's fine. You don't have to know what that means. The academic. So if you're in that route, if you're in those, I mean, there's a lot of cool things about being an academic. One is like, you have regular income, you have a little bit of flexibility. Usually programs want you to be making a national name for yourself, like tenure track programs. I'm in a tenure track program. They want you to be making a national name for yourself as an artist. So that means that I'm going to have to go out and play. I'm going to have to really do new albums. And that also means that they'll help you fund some of that stuff. So like Michigan Tech has this grant program that I applied for. So I just applied for this grant, and I have a new record coming out. It's going to be a while. I have a trio record coming out before that and a couple singles, but the grant thing is like there's grant funds available. There's funds available for you to do creative projects. And having an institution behind you when you apply for grants by like Jerome Foundation, American Composers Forum, or things like that. There's tons of other grants too. There's like Jazz Road grant. There's all kinds of grants of being able to do retreats and like go to a place and just write music the whole time you're there, regardless of the genre. So there's lots of, and what I was going to say is that if you have an institution's name sort of behind you, you get that sort of validation, that external validation, which is the same thing I said about having a record label, like an indie record label that's kind of notable behind your music. That's one of the benefits of having an indie record label too. So the academic, that's 1, 2, 3. The academic was 4, so we're going to 5. The 5th model of being a modern musician is to be the full-time player. A full-time player. That's what I imagined I would be when I graduated, and I sort of did that. But like I said, I started teaching almost right away. And most most people who are, man, I don't know how to, most people who are full-time players, I don't know if this is even totally accurate. It's like they're also doing other stuff. Like they're doing other things. They're doing other creative projects, maybe that are related to film or related to marketing, or they're teaching a little bit here and there on the side because there's so much demand because they're a full-time player and they're in front of audiences all the time. And people are like, hey, can I study with you? There's avenues for full-time artists to do that. When you get to like the real huge level, real famous, being a really, really huge name, it's like you probably do a little less teaching. But I think it's, depending on the genre that you're in the creative fields like jazz and classical music, modern instrumental music, improvised music, there's like a tradition of mentorship. There's a tradition of mentorship. So people still teach even when they get to be the biggest name in their field. And that's one of the cool things about like today, the internet. Like a lot of these people who were inaccessible to us are now just right there at our fingertips. We could send a message, a DM, just be like, hey, do you want to, for me, it's like, hey, do you want to come on the podcast? Do you want to chat? I mean, this is like a way for me to talk to my heroes. I'm going to be talking to Kwang Vu, amazing trumpet player who toured with Pat Metheny and who's played with David Bowie. I listened to that Pat Metheny record, The Way Up, a million times in 2004. And Kwang Vu's the trumpet player on it. And then I listened to his album, Leaps of Faith, about 1 billion times back in the early 2000s, and have taught my students some of his arrangements. So I'm really pumped to talk to him. But so that's it. It's like, for me, it's like, hey, I can DM these people. They're right here at my fingertips. So the full-time players are accessible now, today, more than ever. Definitely the toughest road. If you're just going to play, if you're only going to play, it's going to mean that you're going to be on the road a lot. It's going to mean that you're probably going to have to be a really likable person and an incredible musician and super lucky. Unless you become like uber famous somehow, and that's possible. I mean, it's possible in the modern age, maybe now more than ever, in terms of the gatekeeping. It's like you can go on TikTok and you can go viral, and your single can just totally explode, and then you can get millions of plays on Spotify, and you can get major record labels reaching out to you because of that, which is awesome. And more power to anybody that's experiencing that. But there are also the models of like Brandon Commodore, who was on the show recently, who tours as the drummer for Stokely and music director for Stokely, and the drummer for Mint Condition and Sounds of Blackness. I mean, he's a full-time player, and then he does, like I said about full-time players, he also has a studio and he produces people's stuff. I mean, it's like he loves that. I mean, that's what he does. He does music full-time, and that's awesome. I love that. So the full-time player gonna be touring all the time. Gonna be living on the road. I got another buddy who just basically lives on the road. He's been off. He hasn't paid rent in 2 years. He sent me a text the other day. I haven't paid rent in 2 years because I said, "Do you want to come on the podcast and talk about how you live? Like, how do you do this? How are you doing this?" And he's on the road all the time, or he's in a different country, or he's just traveling. He's really inspiring. He's awesome bass player. Andrew Foreman. For those of you who know Andrew, he was the bass player in Nookie Jones, the neo soul band that I helped found back in the day. That is now it's now defunct. I don't even want to say it because I don't want it to be true. But all right, the full-time player. Now the full-time content creator is the sixth model. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I should have put numbers by these things. The sixth model is the full-time content creator. This one is also, I think, a really tough road, like being a full-time performer. It's going to mean that you're constantly creating. It's going to mean that you have to have a really amazing tech setup, most likely. Certainly, things can be done on an iPhone. But most of these really heavy content creators that have huge followings, it's like they have pretty sweet tech setups. And so you're going to have some savviness with that. And you're going to have to be able to tell a story and be able to bring value to anyone who's watching your videos. I just talked to Dave Chisholm for the podcast, and he is this incredible graphic novelist and musician, and he has some really great tips for exactly what is needed, what you should do to be able to kind of break through the noise of social media and build a following. But being a full-time content creator means that you're likely amassing huge following, and you are also figuring out, you're creating a funnel, essentially. You're figuring out how to get these people in the funnel, which is like, intrigue. I don't know there's different levels of the funnel. This is like, you can look this up. It's a business thing. It's like you want to get people into your funnel, and then as they get lower down into the funnel, they get closer to like purchasing something from you. So like you get them to trust, and then you give them value, and then eventually, hopefully they buy your merch or whatever. And so a lot of people that are content creators on YouTube, and this is true of YouTube, is that the majority of people who make their livings on YouTube, they make more money from merch sales than they do from Google ad or like YouTube ads, which is Google, because Google owns YouTube. So when you do your like Google payments or whatever, I monetize my YouTube channel, and I make, between $50 and $150 a month, depending on the time of year. And I have not created regular content for quite some time, but when I was creating regular content, it was really growing fast. And I just got over 5,000 subscribers. So I'm also like, I'm like pilot testing all these ideas that I'm hearing about and learning about. It's like, I want to know, like, how do you build a following? How do you monetize those people? How do you, it's like monetizing those people sounds so, it's impersonal. Like, we're doing this because we love it, and we're giving value of something that we love, that our heart is in. And so we have to make money from it so we can keep doing it. And so that's essentially where I'm at all the time. I'm like, how do I find, I've said this so many times on the podcast, how do I find the intersection between what I love to do and what people want to hear and see? That's the intersection I'm trying to find. And that's going to be the key to not getting burnt out if you're a content creator. I know now that Instagram is paying people to make reels. So if you have a huge reels viewership, that's an option. So you could work on building something like that up. On the podcast, Ian Allison, he said, make the bug a feature, right? That's the name of the episode. Make the bug a feature, which is like, find the thing in you that you're almost embarrassed to share, and lean into it, because people love to see themselves in you. And we're generally afraid to show our real selves. Be more yourself. Grace Kelly said the same thing. I'm learning so much on this podcast, you see. So full-time content creator, it's a tough road. A select few are going to do it. Merch sales make more money than YouTube ad revenue. Instagram is now offering money for reels, and TikTok has a creator fund. But the creator fund, even though more and more creators are joining the creator fund, so these are people that have larger reach on TikTok, you get put into the creator fund. It's a set amount of money, the creator fund, and then it gets dispersed to the creators. So even though more creators are joining and more people are joining TikTok and more people are seeing the creations, TikTok is not paying the creators more money because of that. It's just a set amount of money that gets divvied. So that's kind of bullshit. And I just learned that with my talk with Dave, which will come out in the next couple of weeks. So you'll hear us talk about that a little more in depth, but that's TikTok as an option for making money. Some people do really well with driving traffic to streaming sites, with building up YouTube, or with building up playlisting on Spotify and other platforms, with using Google ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads to drive traffic to streaming sites, and then they make their money off streaming sites. I think generally speaking, if you're looking at that as a way to like make tons of money, you're probably doing it wrong. It's really more about building up an audience over time, building up a large audience over time that maybe will eventually buy tickets to your next show, or will eventually buy your next merch that you offer. That's really the big thing, is you want to get people to buy merch. So you got to offer cool stuff, and you got to have cool music. So those are all prerequisites. All right. So the seventh avenue is to be the online coach. Now this, I have a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth because I just feel like I'm getting fed so much BS from so many online, quote unquote, online coaches. There's this music ad that keeps popping up in my feed. This one dude who has this coaching program, and he says, the 3 worst ways to grow your music business. He said, number 1, touring. And I went, hold on. Your number 1 worst way for growing a fan base is touring? Is getting out in front of audiences all over the United States and the world? Yeah, that's not the worst way. It's hard, and you're going to have a couple of tours where you're maybe not making a ton of money, but if you're consistently visiting each market and you're using tools like Bands in Town, it's a great tool. If you're using tools like that, and by the way, they don't pay me to market anything. I don't make any money from this. Not yet. I hope someday, maybe. Bands in Town, like a tool like Bands in Town, it's like use that, go to the market regularly, figure out where so you can use Chartmetric, you can use Spotify Analytics, you can see where people are listening from. Go to those markets. If you have a huge listenership, pay for some marketing, try to get some people out and then build over time. It's like touring is totally a viable way. So there's a lot of tools, and I mean that in the negative sense, who are trying to sell you a coaching program. And they are people who really probably don't know what they're talking about. And so you really want to be wary of, a lot of times these will be like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. I've gone down the rabbit hole on some of these things. It's not cheap. And then they'll promise you success. It's like anytime you hear someone promise you success, it's like run the other way. Because come on, this is hard. It's going to be a grind. It's going to be hard. The ones that there are definitely good ones. We've got to deal with Ari's Take Academy. Ari's doing great stuff. He's really doing practical things that you can learn that will advance your career in his online school, Ari's Take Academy. There are some good ones. Ari's kind of a controversial figure too. I know people that talk shit. And it's like, I get it. But the dude's out there, he's got stuff that's really potent. It's for today's musicians, DIY musicians, people who are really trying to make it. Anyways, the full-time content creator, tough road, the online coach. I got a bad taste in my mouth about it. I don't like it. But is this the new private lessons platform? I mean, it's like I've been teaching private lessons forever. I don't do that as much anymore, but people still reach out to me and ask me to teach them remotely. And, that's is an online coaching program kind of the same thing? Like, yes, as long as you're qualified, I guess that's great. So that is an option. And you can also pre-create videos that are a series of videos that somebody could purchase and then watch those videos. And then maybe this is what, like Chris Johnson did this. He did like a series of videos on how to do a certain thing, and then offered like one-on-one coaching as a part of that package. And it would be like two one-on-one coachings. Like you get all these videos and then you get 2 one-on-one coachings. I think that's a cool model. And especially for somebody like Chris, who's like complete and total badass. I had him in with my students. He was on the podcast, Chris Johnson. It starts with touring with Count Basie, but it's like, he talks about that a little bit. He really talks a lot about how he built his music business. It's really a cool talk. So I'd encourage you to check that one out too. But Chris is a complete and total badass. He blew my students' minds. I watched him work with his tech via Zoom. I mean, he was incredible. And so somebody like that, it's like, yes, buy that. Do that. Of course. I would send my students there. I would send my friends there. But there are so many online coaches that are full of crap. Okay, there you go. So the online coach, number 8. And the last two are kind of a bit more general, I guess. Number 8 is the composer. And so I'm talking like a classical composer, a film composer, TV composer, somebody who's just purely identifies as a composer, doesn't teach, doesn't play gigs really. And there are some people like this, plenty of people like this. And what they do is they are really savvy with writing grants, and they're really savvy with getting commissions. And if you can find a way, I was just talking with one of my colleagues about this. She has a friend who basically said, I'm going to double my commission fee, every couple of years. And that's how I'm going to eventually make a living doing this. And she's been able to do that. She's been successful doing that. And I've certainly followed that model as well. I get commissioned to write big band music a lot, and I love doing that. And I'll, over time, I think the first commission I did was like, I asked for $500, and that's like nothing. I charge, thousands of dollars now, between $3,500 and $5,000, depending on the scope of the project. And there are composers that charge much more than I do. And maybe once I win that Grammy, I can charge a little more. But commissions are a way. It's like schools will commission you. There are like public community orchestras, nonprofit orchestras, institutions, all kinds of people that commission artists. Sometimes you can apply for those commissions, but a lot of times, like if you're making a name for yourself as an artist, as a composer, by like releasing music, by doing features, maybe even social media strategies. I don't know what those would be really for composers. I'm now kind of fascinated to try and think of those, what that would look like for a classical composer. But I'm sure there's a niche for that on all these platforms. My kid's yelling in the background, sorry. And you can get commissions. This can be a viable form of income and a viable career. So just being purely a composer, that's model number 8. And then model number 9 is the sync artist. And I just talked with Graham Barton on the show. He's the founder of Sync Beast, and he does music for sync full time. And now he has launched a coaching program where he helps artists kind of prepare their music for sync, connects them to people who do that, databases, companies. So that is another avenue, and that's a tough road as well. And I think if you're gonna really get into sync and try to do it full time, it's like you have to be in the lab creating music all the time, really honing, cutting your teeth, and listening to ads and studying, and then trying to recreate as exercises some of what you hear, but then also just making tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of tracks, and getting them and building relationships with companies that license music. That's definitely an avenue you can do, especially if you're somebody who's a savvy producer. You can mix, you can master. That's huge. And you're a musician, a multi-instrumentalist, a singer maybe. It's like if you can do all of it yourself, and then occasionally, hire someone to play drums, occasionally hire someone to play whatever horns you don't play or whatever. I get hired to play trumpet on some things like that pretty often, and I've got my little home studio here that I'm in right now, which is really not flattering. It's a mess, so I'm not going to show it to you. but I've got a little setup here that I use, and it's great. I record for people all over the world, and so those are people who are sync artists who only make music for sync, or like sync licensing agencies. They'll reach out to me and go, "We need horns on this thing. Could you write it? Could you play it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So that's model number 9. That's the final model. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how I've pieced my thing together. And it's a combination of kind of all of it. I've had music licensed. I've toured all over the world with a ton of different bands. And that's really, I love doing that. I love that. I love traveling. I love touring. I love playing for people. I love being on stage. That's really, I think, when we get down to the crux of it, that's really where my heart is. And I have taught private lessons. I have been in academia now. I've worked day gigs. I worked nights at UPS when I first moved to Minneapolis. That's the part that I left out. I worked nights at UPS. Some people that come from money, they have a spouse who makes a ton of money. That was never my situation. My wife's also a musician, amazing musician. And so it's always been, hey, how can we, at first it was just like, let's just make music. But then it was like, hey, how can we actually survive and make money and maybe have a family? Which is what we're doing now. So I've done all of those things. I continue to do all those things. I make all my own music. I make tracks for myself in my own room. I also hire tons of musicians. I compose music. I get commissioned to do music. I write grants. So that's the model. It's like, that's not even a model. That's just like, grab it where you can get it. But a lot of these opportunities just happened because I was out playing music in front of people. I was putting on great shows. I was writing great music that I loved and that started to resonate with people. And so we started packing clubs and we started selling out we sold out. Yeah, it wasn't quite sold out. It was very close. Parkway Theater in South Minneapolis for our album release show that's the show that became Live in Minneapolis. So if you've seen that, like I flew in artists from Jamaica and from Boston, and I had a 4-piece choir plus my big band. I mean, it was like epic. A lights guy, a sound guy, a videographer. Epic. It was so much work, and I was so stressed leading up to it. Now that I think about it, I was so stressed leading up to it. When you get on the stage, it's like it melts away. So for me, after I finished that show, I remember thinking, man, I got to find somebody to help me with this stuff. How can I need a manager. I need somebody. And then it was like, I got this job at Michigan Tech and left. What have I done? No, I mean, I love it here, and change is good. Change is good. This has been a great thing. I've made so much great music here, and I've been able to what I've wanted to do for a long time was have the space to explore singing and writing songs again, writing songs with lyrics. I always loved that. I wrote poetry my whole life. I had poems published in like poetry.com and stuff. Please don't look them up. Ugh. I was like in high school. But I was a hopeless romantic, always. And I love music. I still, like I said, it's just such a deep part of who I am as a human. That it's hard to see where music starts and where music ends and I begin. It's like we're so intertwined. It's just like, yeah, omnipresent. I'm looking over at my jazz bass over there. I got to play that a little bit more. The curse of the multi-instrumentalist. It's really hard to be good at everything. Trumpet requires my time every day. Requires time. You just can't play it at a high level if you're not really, really plugging away at it. It's probably the case with everything, but it's slightly more noticeable with the trumpet. For whatever it's worth. It doesn't matter, whatever. Woe is me. Who cares? Thank you for listening. Listen, if you're a gigging musician, we've got an app called Gig Boss. We've been working on it for years. And it was based on the insanity of my career, because what I was doing was I was leading my own bands and I was freelancing in dozens of other bands and I was teaching and I was doing all kinds of other stuff. And then we started having kids, and it was like I'd be looking through email chains looking for the details of a gig when I'm like running out the door because I just had the kids and I was just changing a diaper and I was passing the kids off to my wife when she got home, and then running off to my gig, and I can't even find the address. I don't know where we're at. It's like we created this so that there was a place you could go that has the details to your gig right there, that can sync with your Google Calendar, that you can click on the address, you can click on phone numbers to text people, you can track your finances. We're building out a whole bunch more advanced financial tracking, mileage tracking, merch sales, all that stuff. We're building that out starting in October. So it's totally free. It's on iOS and Android. I would love for you to try it. I would love for you to download it. We're talking about maybe making it free for life for anybody that downloads it before we have a subscription model available. Once we get like all of the robust financial tracking stuff built out, I should say, we plan to eventually put that part of the app behind a paywall where you have to pay some kind of subscription. Okay, but for now, it's like the stuff that's there now will always be free, and you can use it to organize your career. You can use it to look at your past gigs, see how much you made, see what the date was, see what the address was if you need to calculate mileage at the end of the year. One of the things I always ran into was like, what the heck did I make on that gig? What did I make? Who did I pay? It's like, who do I owe a 1099 to? I mean, there was like so much of that, because who has time to track all this stuff? It's like I was just always in work mode. I still am. And so I still use it. I use it for everything I get. This gig that I have this weekend with the Hornheads guys, I have it in Gig Boss because at the end of the year, I want to know how much did I make on that? Where was it? How far did I drive? All that stuff. I want to be able to know all that stuff at the click of a button. And it's just going to keep getting better. It's going to keep getting better. Our goal is to become the number one DIY self-management platform for musicians. We're on our way. It's on iOS and Android. Download it, check it out. I'd really appreciate any feedback. You can email me at adam@gigbossapp.com. adam@gigbossapp.com. You can send me an email. It should be like, hey man, it would be awesome if we had XYZ in this app. I could see myself using it if it had blank, 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 blank. Or I love it. Please add this and this. Any words of encouragement would be greatly appreciated. We've been grinding hard and spending our own money, and I mean, we did raise some money to build the app. But man, it's taken so much of our time and so much of our money, and we haven't made anything. We haven't made a cent. We want to eventually, hopefully, make a little bit of money. But really, the whole thing was just to create something that's helpful for musicians because we know the struggle. We're living it still. All right, that's it. 9 ways to create a career in music, a meaningful career in music. 9 models of being a modern musician. I don't know what I'm going to call the episode yet, so I'm saying both just to cover all my bases. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you very much. I can see that more people are finding the show. We've got a Facebook group called Gig Boss Podcast where we just discuss all this stuff. Iron sharpens iron. You know what I mean? Get in there and ask a question. There's a bunch of people that are asking questions, commenting, and trying to help each other out. The whole thing is just to help each other out. I just want to help people out. My students aren't music majors. So one of the things I said when I got to Michigan Tech, I was like, man, it's too bad I can't tell everybody everything I know about how to make a career in music because this is like what I do. But these students are going to be engineers, which is awesome, and I love that. And they're doing music because they love it, and we're having a blast. And I really do love working with them. But this is an outlet for me. The Gig Boss Podcast group, the Gig Boss Podcast is an outlet for me to tell you what I know, what I've learned, because I want to be able to do that. All right, much love. Good luck on your journey. Thanks for listening.